The biggest question of all is probably the simplest. Why do we do the things we do? It's this incredible puzzle, right? Our daily habits, our biggest choices, it's all so complex. But here's the thing, it's not unsolvable. Psychologists actually have a whole toolkit for investigating our behavior, and in this explainer, we're going to open it up and see what's inside.
I think we've all had that thought. You see something happening and everyone just stands there. It's a chilling moment. Well, today we're going to unpack the scientific method psychologists use to find real, solid answers to questions exactly like that one.
So, before a psychologist even dreams of running an experiment, they have to be crystal clear on their mission. This isn't about reading minds or making wild guesses. Nope. This is a science, and every good science has very specific goals.
These goals are basically the foundation for every single study. They give the whole investigation structure and focus. So let's break down what they actually are. Okay, what's so cool here is how these 5 goals build on each other, kind of like levels in a game. First, you just describe what you're seeing. Then you try to predict when it'll happen again. The real detective work starts with step 3, explaining the why behind it. And once you know why, you can move to controlling or influencing it. And finally, applying all that knowledge to actually help people in the real world. It's a really powerful process. So we know the mission, but what's the method? How do psychologists go about achieving those goals? Well, they don't just wing it. They follow a super rigorous, systematic process, a 4-step plan to get as close to the truth as possible. And here it is. This is the roadmap. It's called the scientific method. And honestly, this is what separates psychology from just, guesswork. It makes sure that the findings are objective, that other scientists can repeat the experiment, and that we can all build on each other's work. It all starts with a problem, right? You form a question and a hypothesis, which is really just a fancy word for a testable prediction. Then you go out and collect data to see if you're right. After that, you analyze the data, draw your conclusions, and this is the important part, you revise your ideas based on what you found. It's this constant cycle of learning. So, enough theory, let's see how this thing works in a classic case. All right, we're jumping in a time machine to witness a truly brilliant experiment. It gets right back to that question we started with and reveals something absolutely startling about how we act in a crisis. Picture this, it's 1970. We're at Columbia University with 2 psychologists, Bibb Latané and John Darley. They've cooked up a really clever study to figure out why, sometimes, good people do nothing in an emergency. So the setup is pretty simple. A student shows up, thinking they're there for an interview. They're led to a waiting room and handed a questionnaire to fill out. Seems totally normal, right? Nothing out of the ordinary.
But then things get weird. Smoke starts pouring into the room from a vent in the wall. And we're not talking a little puff. Within just a few minutes, the room is getting seriously smoky, to the point where it's tough to see and even a little hard to breathe. And this is the moment of truth. This is the real experiment. Are these students going to get up and report a potential fire? Well, as the researchers found out, the answer depended entirely on one single, incredibly powerful factor.
Okay, let's put on our detective hats. We're going to break this whole thing down using that scientific toolkit we just talked about. Let's decode what's really going on here.
First up, the independent variable. This is the one thing the researchers are messing with on purpose, the one thing they change to see what happens. In this case, Latané and Darley changed whether the student was alone in the room or with other people. It's the cause they're testing. And if the first thing was the cause, then this is the effect. The dependent variable is what they measure. And here it was super simple. Did the student get up and report the smoke? Yes or no? Now, this is where the genius of the study really comes in. They needed to compare 2 different situations. In the control group, the student was totally alone. But in the experimental group, the student was sitting with 2 other people who were secretly actors paid to do absolutely nothing, just sit there and ignore the smoke. This comparison is everything.
So what happened? Well, the results were staggering. When the students were alone, a huge 75% of them got up, left the room, and reported the smoke. They saw a problem and they did something about it. But, and this is wild, look what happened when those 2 passive actors were in the room. The number of students who reported the smoke plummeted to just 10%. Only 1 in 10 people acted. The mere presence of others who were doing nothing was enough to paralyze almost everyone. The experiment was a home run. It showed a clear cause and effect relationship. It wasn't about people being brave or cowardly. It was about the social situation they were in. And this phenomenon got a name: the bystander effect. Now, experiments like this are incredibly powerful, but they aren't perfect. It's really important to remember that to get the full picture of how psychology works. I mean, think about it. What happens in a controlled lab might not perfectly match the messy, unpredictable real world. That's a big one. Plus, some things are just impossible or totally unethical to experiment on. You can't put people in real danger just to see what happens. Every research method has its pros and cons. And that's really the main takeaway. No single study is ever the final answer. The goal isn't to create one perfect experiment. The goal is to have a systematic, reliable way to get closer and closer to the truth. By understanding these methods, we all get a little better at understanding the world and the people around us. So it really makes you think, doesn't it? Now that you know the rules of the game, that you have this toolkit for figuring things out, what would you want to know? What mystery of human behavior would you try to solve?